She was a lucky break. That's what serendipity is referred to in Flatland. A lucky break, when the stars aligned because I sent out the call to reunite with my third person.
It's in a really nice space. There's like a smoker chairs and like someone's study library, wood burning stove, there's like a fireplace, and so it's really cozy. And you're sitting, there's two chairs facing each other with a chess board in the middle. And you're sitting in one of the chairs, and so I'm kind of seeing you at this angle, so you're sitting here, right? It's really nice. It's very, the feeling is a very, like a masculine place that you would sit down to, like even have a whiskey and play a game of chess, but it's very private. Like there's no one else around, so this is like a very nice space for you. This is your space. There's books on the back, and so you're sitting, and there's a really nice chessboard, and you're talking, and you're really in about the game. It's about the game, and you're talking about moving and the movement that you're making. It's like even before I go in, like I'm in, but I'm calling all your people. I'm already hearing you speaking about the chess move, and then I see it. So you're really engaged in this. So I'm curious, and I say, well, who are you playing against? And I can't go there at first. And then finally I go there and it's empty. But then I see like you like quickly move to the other side, and you play a move, and again you're speaking through it too. So you're really hyper engaged in this. And then and you're really good with the human thing. But so it's really easy for you. You like it. There's a excitement and a using all of your abilities that really tantalizes you. You mastered that. You're really good at this chess game of life. Yeah, it's kind of serious for you. I mean, it didn't get this sense in this space that you take it lightly. You've created with deep intention and integrity and all of that. I mean, it's all good. And it's also what pulls you away from, let's say, or this other piece, this wolf one in you, because it's so comfortable and it's so easy and it's really important. Whereas this wolf one is sort of it's another, it means, we need to go outside. I mean, we need to shift location. So in honoring it's about honoring yourself. You have these tools and you've cultivated them for a reason. This is what you needed to do and who you are. So it's beginning that excitement of, I don't know, but I'm open to the magic of the possibility of where my surprises will come from. And my surprises lead me to wonder and awe that, wait, there's a lot more happening in this universe than I ever imagined. And I'm so high on the fact that all these animals and nature is coming to my attention with the confirmations that I'm getting.
This Cahooter has a particular penchant to perceive the third person because she is deep in the margins. So far off-grid, only serendipity's call will yield her response. She has no hourly rate. She has no time constraints. She works for Source, and Source compensates her through synchronicities, the divine revenue stream. My lucky break was a breakthrough because she helped me remember my third person by seeing me.
Third-person omniscient is a point of view where the narrator has access to every single character's thoughts, emotions, and feelings. The narrator is basically all-knowing and can see any part of the world and access any piece of information that they want.
My third-person omniscient was moving from one chair to another, allowing me to access a fuller point of view, playing both sides of the game, not against, rather with all sides in order to gain understanding of the whole.
With a third-person limited point of view, the narrator is tethered to one character's thoughts and emotions at a time. As a result, the narrator takes on the qualities of this character's voice and persona. The narrator only knows and can only show what the character knows, as the entire narrative is going to be filtered through this character's mind. Sometimes a third-person limited can be so close that it's almost the same as a first person.
Once my third-person omniscient settled into the chair and focused on a piece, I embodied a specific and therefore limited point of view of the piece selected, shifting into first person. The chessboard represents flatland. It is the XY axis. It is forward and back, left and right, but not up and down. My Kahooter was accurate. I do not take this game lightly. This game of life, these players, the sentient beings in life. She was accurately reading the wolf in me saying, we need to shift things. And my abilities to see all sides, to embody others' points of view, and perceive multi-dimensions is how all of me is working on that shift because the third person in me recognizes the interconnectedness of being. What my Kahooter witnessed was a form of psychotherapy called psychodrama, founded by Jacob Morano.
If you're really interested in learning about Moreno's history and the history of his methods, the autobiography is a good read. It really introduces you to him as a person with all of his genius and all of his flaws. He really censored nothing in his writing. And it gives a good history of his methods and outlines the thinking of his, in terms of his philosophy, especially his mystical philosophy. So here's kind of a brief history of Moreno. What he describes as his mystical phase was earlier in his life. A lot of people don't realize that prior to founding psychodrama, he was a mystic. He founded a religion called the Religion of the Encounter. And it was based on the idea that within each person existed God, and that we should treat everybody as if they were God, as if they were divine. He had a vision of what he called societry, psychiatry for society, that rather than looking at how do we heal individuals or help individuals heal themselves in individual sessions, that we need to focus on all of society. Moreno talked about the organic unity of mankind, basically as this shared humanness that binds us all together as a single group, a single entity. That just like we approach the group as a whole, the group as the patient, as its own entity, that society, that mankind was its own group, its own entity, that it had its own organic unity, just like a smaller group has. He sometimes refers to this as our primordial nature. Then we have Moreno's social atom, which is a map of close relationships around an individual. And an interesting sociometry philosophy of Moreno's, if you look at the image on the bottom right, Moreno actually argued that the psyche existed outside of the body, and that the reason why we're able to interface with each other on the social level and experience tele and transference and projection and with each other is that because our psyches are constantly interfacing with each other, but that the body exists within the psyche. Of course, this idea challenges the medical model, because if mental illness exists within the psyche, in Moreno's idea, it's not within the body, but that it's in between the body and the social, and that it had to be treated in groups, had to be treated at the societal level and through relationships.
Our primordial nature is divine, and from this premise, treat everyone as if they are divine, because we are bound together. This is why the chessboard has been important and something I take very serious. Yes, it is a gameplay, and fun is precisely what the wolf in me would love to experience in life, but not under the current premise. Do you know what happened to wolves?
Let's start in the early 1900s. Back then, wolves were seen as nothing but pests, dangerous predators that needed to be eliminated. The US government actually had official wolf killers, people whose job was literally to just shoot, trap, or poison every wolf they could find. And they were really good at their jobs. By 1926, the last wolf pack in Yellowstone had been killed. People celebrated this as a victory.
My third persons, omniscient and limited, are rather invested in resolving this chess game peacefully. That's where second person comes in.
Second person is a point of view that uses a you pronoun and is probably the strange enigma of all the point of views. It's not commonly used in novels, but is sometimes used in short fiction. Even though it's quite rare, it can create some really interesting effects, such as sometimes the you is meant to imply that the reader is the protagonist, really bringing them into the story, so they're a part of the narrative themselves. It can also create a really unique tone, in which the character is kind of accusing themselves, or it's as if it's the character's conscience narrating the story. A second-person narrator doesn't have to imply that the reader is the character. A second-person narrator can actually have a name and a fully fleshed out personality. This is when the second person becomes a way of showing the character's dissociation from themselves. There's also a type of second person where first and second person blend, and the narrator refers to the reader as you or another character in the story as you. This gives the story a very specific direction and can be quite an interesting tool to play around with. Second person can be really telling of the central ideas of the story because the form in itself can speak so profoundly to the state of mind of the narrator, because it's really telling of the narrator's relationship to themselves and other characters. However, second person is tricky, and most editors will advise using against it in a novel. This is why. It can be really confusing. It can also grow tiring or exhausting to read because the reader isn't used to reading it, especially if the you is used too heavily, which can be really tempting because you is quite a lyrical word, so it can be tempting to place a you at the start of every single sentence, making the presence of the second person really heavy. It can also ask a lot of your reader, either because it's difficult to read, or because in cases that are meant to imply the reader is the character, the reader might not be able to suspend their disbelief that they would actually do such things. It is a bit of a risky move because it can be a turnoff for editors and readers, many of whom simply just don't like it.
In Love's playlist, every story after the introduction, which amounts to 62 stories, uses the second person you. I intentionally use this writing method to provide an exercise in understanding a pivotal component or missing element in Flatland, the I-thou relationship.
Martin Buber's book, I and Thou, is perhaps the most well-known philosophy of dialogue. So I and Thou is written in German, and the German title is Ich und Du, I and You. And what's important about that title is that in German there are two forms of you. There's the formal, the Sie, and the informal, the Du. Du was reserved for family members and friends of a deeply intimate nature. Imagine that urgency in everyday language. And that's the German of Buber's moment. I and Thou tries to help us understand why our world is broken and how to fix it through interpersonal relationships. Buber often reflected back onto the moment his mother left him when he was 3 years old. And there was a sense of fear and confusion. And when his father couldn't raise him on his own, he was sent to his grandparents, who were Orthodox Jews living in Eastern Europe, raised him. It created an uncertainty in him because he didn't have the conventional relationship with parents that built that kind of trust that then allows for the use of the word do. So Buber opens his book on I and Thou by setting up two relationships and how we orient to the world. The first is I-it, and the second is I-thou. So I-it describes a relationship between the I, so you as a subject, an interesting person, interpreting the world. And you interpret the world through your five senses, but you understand that it's not you, that it's separated from you. And in many cases, that those relationships become objectified. The it becomes an object. And we, as a way of protecting ourselves from that objectification, use myriad labels to describe who we are. I'm Jewish, I'm American, I'm from a certain place, I now live in a certain place. And so in the I-it world, you run into the danger of racism, patriarchy, sexism, homophobia, religious bigotry. Because once you have the ability to objectify a human being, it allows you to understand it in a way that gives you some sense of power, some control, and some understanding. And that's the danger of I-it. Yet at the same time, you can't live in a world without I-it. There are certain relationships that require you to be an I and the other end to be an it. Every time I go to the Safeway and I buy something that's going through the conveyor belt, there's another person there. Each of us sees us as a means to an end. But it becomes a problem when I associate that interaction with some value, that there's something about that person and their work or their vocation that I can objectify and judge. But what's interesting is that for Buber, if that cashier and I exchanged a moment, we could have an I-thou relationship in which all of those I-it relationships that make up the empirical world, that make up reality, will disappear. We're no longer the people we were in that moment. We're something different, and both of us recognize that. That's called genuine mutuality, in which we recognize each other in our absolute subjectivity, in that you are a unique person at this moment in time, as am I, and we're sharing something.
Genuine mutuality. Symbiosis available in the most mundane situations, overlooked, discarded, or discounted because we have flattened out life and relationship have become I-it transactions, even inside our homes. As we become pragmatists, dividing to conquer flatland, objectifying ourselves into a role, typecast in that role as a provider, a caregiver, a child, and then we begin to believe we are independent, which is actually the denial of connection. Because to count, we need to do it with our own steam, relegating interconnectedness to the unseen. And in this flattened version of our world, the relegation substitutes our third person for an external authority, a king, a preacher, a teacher, a principal, a boss, a parent, and so on. These points of views are the lenses needed to perceive beyond flatland, to remember, to access the larger picture, the first, second, and third person integrated. The third person does not ask self to surrender. That's the flatland method necessary to surrender to a substitute. The third person encourages balance between the first, second, and third persons. And to balance these accounts requires awareness, because you cannot choose what you do not see, and you cannot see what is inherited, ingrained, and habituated. Simply put, count your discounts to account for remembering. Remember this dismembered being, like a nun with a physiological structure, dismembering of Alzheimer's, while demonstrating no symptoms, providing the anomaly of that Z-axis. The anomalies that give clues of tracing our footsteps to dismemberment that arises from living in flatland under the arc. I thought of the gesture my third person did, the slow spin counterclockwise, turning back time, uncoiling from the past.
When we go, here we go.
This is the key to remember, to return home, uncoiling from flatland, unforgetting life before the normal arc, unschooling from learning. Taking an accounting of your life is when you mark when you've been flattened. Taking an accounting of your life is when you mark your location in the line model. Taking an accounting of your life is tracking your discounts. Become self-governing and count yourself by acknowledging the exchange. Then balance your accounts by asking, is it worth it? Is the cost of a connection worth the dismemberment of self? Self-governance is a vulnerable process exposing self to self. The reciprocity of vulnerability is sovereignty and recovery of self. But when we become enclosed in the trappings of commoditization of self and the I-it relationship, the vitality of life drains to bankruptcy.
Come on, skinny love, just last the year. Poor little soul, we were never here. My, 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 with a sink of blood and crushed veneer.